Knockback, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Knockback. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother, Dagan Moriarty. Dagan, welcome back to the show. How are you today, my friend?
Hello, Colin Moriarty.
Yes.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. What's going on?
Always does me good to see you.
Oh, yes. It's a horse blanket.
On my mic.
Oh, you gotta
get rid of that little fuzzy.
Yeah. What's going on in your life?
I was just remembering to turn. You don't want to commit the podcasting faux pas of having your cell phone volume on. So I just turning that down. Man, I'm telling you, I know now there was some debate over the last week. Are you getting sick? A little flu-like type thing going on? Or is it allergies? It's got to be allergies. Every time I step outside, the weather is beautiful right now. You know, it's like 65, sunny, maybe approaching 70 a little later in the day. You know, really nice. But I go in to do something super simple, like walk the dog or get the garbage can, bring the garbage cans back up. I come back inside and my head is just swimming. I'm like, what is going on? In the fall, too, which I think is strange for me, because usually I'll get hit every other spring or something like that. The pollen, the flowers are blooming and everything like that. Fall is a weird one. But yeah, it's really having like an impact on me. It's so strange. You're supposed to, it's so weird. Like I feel like as you get older, you should grow out of these things. We should reward ourselves with aging, not, get worse as we get older. But yes, I don't know what's going on out there. And I hear it from people everywhere, like all over the country, West Coast friends, people down south in Georgia. So I hear it's like all over the country. I don't know what's going on.
They do like to do things a little bit more deliberately down there in Georgia.
See how I tied that in for you?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Anyone brings up any of the South Carolina, Alabama, down there. Well, Dave, speaking of nature, we're here today to talk about the 2009
Look at us
film Avatar. And so I have an ulterior motive for this, and my time management, my need for time management is that there's a game coming out in December from when we're recording this from a studio I really love called Massive that's owned by Ubisoft over in Europe. And they make a series I love called The Division. And they're making more Division games, which is cool. But they have also been working on a long in development Avatar first-person shooter that looks a little bit more like a Far Cry game, which really speaks to me because I love Far Cry as well. And so I knew I was going to play that game. I was like, yeah, I Massive with the kind of Far Cry checklist, open world. I'm down with that. That sounds great. But I don't know anything about Avatar. And so that would be heavy poser energy. Thus, and I can't have that. And I was always planning on kind of watching it in the prelude anyway. The second one just kind of came out more recently, which I know even less about. I did watch the trailer this morning for that just to kind of like understand it now that I've seen the film. And so now I have the appropriate, or maybe half of what would be the appropriate knowledge for the game. I guess I'll watch the second one at some point too. But this was my first experience with Avatar. And back when this movie came out in late 2009, James Cameron, of course, I just missed it. I just didn't give a shit. I didn't know anyone that gave a shit. And that's actually one of the funny legacies of this film. And I noted this just looking at the Wikipedia earlier today when I was just taking some extraneous notes on release dates and all of the rest, that there's an entire section of the Wikipedia related to the fact that how is this movie so big without having really any cultural resonance almost at all. In other words, it made such a dramatic amount of money and did dramatically well, and no one talks about it. And I think someone in the legacy thing wrote how no one even knows like who any of the characters are or anything. Like there's just nothing about it. It's very vanilla. And so I went in going back and thinking about it through the lens of what I saw. I'm like, yeah, kind of. I thought it was a little boring actually. And what's a bummer about it is the first. I made Michael laugh because like the first 15 minutes or so, I was like, this is fucking dope. And then I was like, how did I not? They're on like a long voyage interstellar ship in cryo freezing, and they're going to this moon of a gas giant that's wonderfully wooded and has all this crazy wildlife, and they have this massive mining operation. I was like, this is awesome. And I got vibes obviously of like Terminator and just, I don't know, you can feel a lot of James Cameron in there. And
yeah, a lot of aliens.
Aliens, of course, right. Of course. Yep. And I was just like, okay, this is great. And then I said, this is exactly what I said. I'm like, wait a minute. Because I had this revelation. Because it goes and it's all humans and all the rest, and it just looks great. And I'm like, wait a minute. The blue people are going to fuck this up, aren't they? That's exactly what I said. And she laughed and kind of just like, wait. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of a little bit of what happened. It's not to me to, who the fuck am I? James Cameron is like one of the most accomplished filmmakers and writers of entertainment of all time. And he knows exactly what he's doing. But I see in Avatar, my first instinct in talking about it is just that there is something really cool here. And they just did everything they could to not get into what was cool about their situation. And that to me was a little bit of a bummer. So in watching Avatar, which is apparently a beloved film, it made $3 billion at the box office, which is crazy. Huge. 10 times probably what it cost to make. So everyone made a lot of money involved in it. Fox, and I saw that Fox actually turned it down. And then when Disney was sniffing around, they kind of, before Disney obviously bought all that stuff, they came back and said like, no, never mind, we'll take it. Very smart move. Yeah. And James Cameron obviously negotiating his rates and all of these various things. So that's very cool. And it's one of the most highest grossing films I think ever, especially adjusted for inflation. But I think it's just kind of vanilla. And it's not even the CG, which is very good for the time, but doesn't hold up as well, I think. And I appreciate that he wanted to make it even earlier, and I'm glad that he held off on doing that. But I thought it didn't pay attention to what was cool about it. It could have been something different. It should have probably been something different. I'm not particularly interested in the Na'vi at all. They're kind of boring. And I think that it's very rushed. There's a pacing issue in it too. When I kept saying to Mike, I was like, this is like a trilogy in one movie. When he's speaking, for instance, the Jake Sully's speaking to the Na'vi, I'm like, you would expect that this would be something that would happen in the middle of the third movie or something,
Yeah. That's well said.
It's like very fast, and they don't take time like that. What we saw in the first film could have been all of Avatar, and I don't know where they're going to go from here. Obviously, they're going to retaliate and do all that stuff, I'm sure, and the humans are going to come back and fuck everything up, and they kind of tease that very open-endedly at the end of the first Avatar, which is cool. But that's kind of my opening salvo about the film, is that it starts out really, really cool. I wish it remained what it was before we saw the Na'vi. In other words, it would have been cool if you never really even see them, or you only see them scarcely, and there's a horror element to it or something. I don't know, man. It's just, I can see now why this movie kind of just came and went through people based on its fidelity and the way they saw it in the theaters and all the rest, but it's not really well talked about today is because it's not great, in my opinion. Yeah. It's fine.
And it's old.
Yeah. Anyway, what do you think? I threw out a lot there. What do you think about Avatar?
Yeah, I mean, it's well said. I like you referring to it as vanilla. I think that whole sentiment about the Na'vi is that's a pretty popular sentiment among people like you and I think, generally, even now, 13, 14 years on, and the whole thing. And what's interesting about this topic, and I totally understood why you picked it, is that, first of all, it fits into the knockback criteria wonderfully. Mm-hmm. So that's fine. Check that off the list. But I think it's strange in that you and I were both under a rock with this movie. I hadn't seen it either for some reason. And really, for me, similar to you, I always kind of judged it from afar and honestly kind of turned my nose up at it from a distance for a long time, of course, without ever bothering to see it. And I'm not even exactly sure why. I think I was kind of put off by that sort of, all right, this is Uncanny Valley, the movie, especially channeling like a late aughts Dagan. I could definitely see, despite James Cameron, who I really like, we talk about Terminator, Aliens is one of my favorite films of all time. Despite that, I just thought of like, this isn't Aliens, James Cameron. This is Titanic, James Cameron. There was something about that. And you know what I discovered though with this? I'll be honest with you. This does make a much better movie now having seen it than a trailer, right? It's totally, for me, it was totally fine. It just doesn't hold up as a 2-minute clip show. I channel myself watching trailers for this back in 2008, 2009. And for some reason, it just can't be all these wacky visuals. It just needed context. So I come out thinking the movie was okay. It was pretty good. It was better than I expected, judging it from just watching 2-minute clip shows again, like a reel, like a demo reel of the movie. It just doesn't, it's a rare thing in that the movie just didn't work like that. I thought it was okay, but there is something, and we'll talk about this more, I'm sure, with the special effects later, but there's something, I have a sneaky suspicion about this movie that there's this kind of, I don't know, there's this kind of purist mantra that I apply to things, not just as a creator, but as someone who's like an avid moviegoer, right? And who likes media. As long as the process is organic. So as long as the story and the story you want to tell is dictating the requirements for the technology and the visuals and the digital tools, it won't feel cold and it won't feel superficial and it won't feel artificial. And I think there's two James Camerons, right? There's the one you hear about that's like, oh, I grew up in the woods, kind of very Miyamoto. Like I just would spend 10 hours in the forest collecting crickets, and it was all about nature. It was all about, imagination. And then you hear the James Cameron literally saying in the same breath, like, I headed up a special effects house, a VFX house, and it was all about creating the digital tools that nobody could catch up with. It was all about the technology. It was all about what we could do digitally. And, it was all about that sort of the look and feel and what can we do now with the computer. So I think this movie has a little bit of A, which helps it for me, and a little bit of B, but the B really does make it feel weird. I think with the Na'vi and the technology and the look of these blue creatures, it grew on me. I have to say it did grow on me over the course of the film, but I also know what you're saying, that in that sort of original 10 or 15 minute churning as the movie started up, which was largely obviously live action with a lot of cool visual effects in terms of environments and the spaceships and all of those type of things before the creatures, really, you could say. It felt more like a grounded Terminator Aliens type thing, which is, this is just going to be like a badass sci-fi James Cameron thing. And then it grows into this visual effects circus, basically. And then I could see that losing a lot of people, because especially in 2009, it wasn't as bad as I thought, and it didn't age as badly as I thought it would 15 years on. There's also a really strange thing that's a little annoying to me with Avatar, in that this is a weird franchise, originally one film for many years until literally not even a year ago, right? Now we're going to get 3 more after the sequel, but this is something with seemingly no expiration date, even though it seems like nobody really cares about it. Everybody has a very laissez-faire attitude.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And a weird indifference.
It's very,
like they'll watch it, but it doesn't stay with them. It has this constant evergreen relevancy despite the apathy that's really strange. It's immortal, but at the same time, everybody's just like treats it as it's like this arm's length relationship with it. Like, I don't love it, I don't hate it, it's just a thing. I didn't know anything about it, Kyle, except when we went to Disney World in 2017. The ride was almost finished. There's a ride at Disney World's Animal Kingdom in Orlando called Avatar Flight of Passage, which is not a traditional roller coaster. It's actually kind of a 3D virtual reality joyride thing, where you just fly on the back of a Banshee through Pandora. And when we went back in 2020, early 2020, which was the last time we were there, we got to go on it. And it was pretty awesome. It was the one ride across all the theme parks there that was like, okay, that's a 3-hour wait in line, even with the fast pass, that type of thing. It was brand new at that point. It was relatively new at that point. It was still very, very popular. But that's what I'm talking about. Everybody knows it. Everybody will stand online in Disney for countless hours. But it's not like nobody's a diehard fan like they see. It seems like a Star Wars. right? Or like a Batman or like a Star Trek. There's no hardcore devotees to it, which is really strange. But it's nice now to get a little context. And I understand your sort of point of view of like wanting to have that foundation. Let me check out the source material before this game comes out, which I'm almost assured to like, given the developer and everything like that. So I understand why you wanted to do it. It was nice to finally do it. And I guess the upside is that, I'm not madly in love with it, but it was at least okay for me.
Yeah, it was fine. It was totally fine. I loved what you said, complete indifference. I just became, the more it got ingratiated with the Na'vi and being with the Na'vi and then the fight, I'm like, it gave me a little bit of episode 1 vibes, Jar Jar Binks kind of vibes.
Totally.
The Naboo shit vibes with the fights, but everything's weird and foreign. And that's cool. See, that's what's frustrating to me about this movie is it's a wonderful idea. Again, I'm way out of bounds because of how popular and how much money it made. Although, like you said, indifference and apathy toward it. So maybe everyone just feels like this. It was one of those cultural zeitgeists. It's the same way about how, no disrespect to her specifically, but someone like Britney Spears selling, 10 million copies of a record. Everyone's like, how the fuck? But it happens and it's fine. She's fine. And this is fine. But when I see the setup, I'm like, oh, James, you didn't understand what was truly cool about this. And it does feel like you are wedging, again, 5 movies there's going to be of this. And I'm like, where? And this is what I was remarking to Michael when we were watching. I'm like, this could have been the 5 movies. I don't even understand what this can possibly be about now. Why did they go? If he had this whole vision for this, because I didn't know this about his filmography. I'd assume there were a few things in between, and there are documentaries, but he didn't do anything in between Avatar and Avatar: Way of the Water in terms of major motion picture releases or whatever.
Yeah, no.
So this was his vision, and he's been living with this since the 90s and all of that. And so it's so surprising to me that his vision was something so rapid in the first movie, where I was like, you could have just slowed this down. The first movie could have just been about their arrival and interactions, like initial interactions, almost a horror-like feel. The second one, maybe Jake Sully's taken by them or something crazy happens. The third one, obviously a resolution where maybe they all agree to fight back and for that one day they win against this mega corporation. But they move so fast. And so I see this butterfly effect that comes out from this main story. And I'm like, damn, dude, you could have gone in almost any other direction and it would have been more interesting than this. Because when you see, I love the visuals, the everything about it. They're in space for 6 years. There's this question I have, and maybe it's answered in extraneous. I'm not reading any of the books. I'm not. Please, just don't even.
They definitely must exist.
Yeah, there's like a small canon, I think, around it in different ways.
Yeah,
and so I'd like to know. They're in these ships for 6 years. That seems like a short amount of time to go into cryosleep. To be honest with you, you're not. Cryosleep as we envision it, at least in hard sci-fi, is not for 6-year voyages. So I'm confused about that, about how quickly they travel and all of that. But there's all this cool stuff. Like you said, aliens like setup. You see this huge gas giant with other moons. And then this moon that we're going to, Pandora, you land there. The visuals are wonderful. Just a huge landing pad with a perimeter. And then just complete wildlife, right? Like this is a base in the wilderness. The most dangerous places they set up. And I love that thing, the intro with the military guy where he's like, yeah, this is like the fucking craziest thing you're ever going to experience. And I'm like, this is dope. This is so cool. They have really no idea what they're dealing with. They're here out of greed. And this could have leaned a lot harder into the allegory that obviously exists underneath the movie, which is like colonialism's bad and you can't treat the earth badly and be careful how you do blah, blah, blah. Okay. So, and we'll get into all of that. And that's cool, but it's so corny, some of it, the way they do it, the creepy thing with the hair where you plug into other animals and the sentience of the I'm like, this kind of sucks, dude. No offense.
Was so strange.
I was like,
why didn't they just leave that out and just do like a psychic link? If you're gonna channel anime, and we'll talk about this, if you want to borrow from anime, do something a little more elegant where it's like a telekinetic thing with ESP and stuff. Why this weird sort of nod towards sexual tendril plugging into each other, male, female type shit? It was kind of gross. And it reminded me a lot of what they would do with The Last of Us, with the zombies and the undead or the mushroom people in that show. much later on, but it worked so much more effectively in the game and that TV series than it does. Yeah, that was that's a strange. Listen, I wonder, in saying all this, not having had this thought previously, but now thinking, like, is CG technology and the digital tools, is that just bad for James Cameron? Because when you think of something like Aliens, right? We love the xenomorphs, but there's a buildup. There's a slow burn to actually seeing them. And you really don't see much of them throughout the movie until that climactic queen fight at the end. You really don't see much of the xenomorphs. It leaves you wanting more. And because the practical effects and trying to make it look sophisticated, you can't really you have to use your illusion, right? To channel Guns N' Roses. Yeah. You have to do smoke and mirrors. You have to show things in the dark. You have to, actually not show the cards you're playing, right? With digital tools, you have the ability to do anything, but that doesn't mean you should. And there's like this clamoring to get to it in this movie. I know exactly what you're saying. It feels like, let's show them all the badass digital shit. Let's show them all the Weta. Let's show them all the stuff we've been working on and developing for the last 15 years. There's like this mad dash to get to that. And again, I think there's this feeling of superficiality to that, where it's like, it's not about the story anymore. It's not about setting up this interesting character, this Marine who's disabled that, lost his brother. And even that stuff that you're saying leading into Pandora, there's one beautiful shot. I kept rewinding and I was like, dude, you got to finish this movie, where they come into the planet and they're sort of, I guess it's kind of supposed to be a quarry. And there's these giant dump trucks, which are just futuristic approximations of what we already have. And then behind it, there's this giant sifting machine. It's gorgeous. Mm-hmm. Like, it's what they do with environments and atmosphere. And again, the spacecraft and the different tech and mech is pretty cool in this movie. It's not until you get to the creatures, specifically the Na'vi, where it's like, it feels like showing off. I guess that's really what it is, which it feels like a lot of style and not a lot of substance, and this is, I wonder what our younger viewers will think, because this is two old men sort of, barking up the same tree as we always do. But I stand behind that. There's just something, there's a feeling, that's like something that you get in Aliens versus something that you get in this movie, where, I don't know, it's just better storytelling. It doesn't have to rely on the digital tools. I'm a fan of the digital tools. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I like a lot of what they did too. I just think I think this level of design is just very uninteresting after a while. The exotic biology. It's cool at first, especially plant life, and seeing how that's all rendered. And with the different biologies that they have, I'm sure it's somewhere, but their atmosphere obviously isn't the same as ours. I don't know if they all breathe oxygen. It's just different levels, or if it's a different thing entirely, and they're pulling different things out of the atmosphere. I have no idea, but it's cool to think about that and hypothesize about that. Let me ask you this. All right, so everything happens in the beginning. You're in a spaceship. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I did look this up enough to know that and I don't think it's actually in the movie, but the planet is in Alpha Centauri, which is actually where Herbroxy is also set, and a bunch of other stuff. It's all things are set there all the time because it is the closest star system to the Earth outside of our own system, and it's 4 light years away. So that suggests that a 6-year voyage, they're going at 75% the speed of light. So they cryo freeze themselves, go there. So we have all of this story. You get to this place, you see exactly what you see. You land, you see the huge Earth churners and all of that, and everyone gets out. Like, where would you go from there? Because to me, it's like you gotta make a small group of interesting people and penetrate and go out into the woods. To me, it should have been like, we've never really gone much further than this. We don't have much of an interaction with these people. We were kind of scared of them. They have carbon reinforced bones and all these things. And we have an alien like, or an aliens like group of military guys that are going to go out in this Vietnam like war situation and try to figure things out. Like, to me, that's the direction I would have gone in. Kept it very, I don't know, fucking creepy. And it could be Platoon-like in the sense that like they're doing horrible shit, and they are like, if you want to keep with that theme, which is totally fine with me, I think even worthwhile to explore, then say like, yeah, this is a group of humanity that has no respect for anything. They come from an Earth that they've completely destroyed. already. They're ready to do it here, but you don't have to be so literal with it, with huge earth movers just barreling through the forest to this massive tree that you're going to shoot missiles at. And so I'm like, this is kind of like something a 6-year-old would have written in some, no offense, like in some way, like the way it goes out, as opposed to something more thoughtful and deliberate that would have allowed it to breathe. So I don't know if he felt like he needed to get too much into the film, like just too much information that had no real clarity, probably didn't. And if he would ever get a chance to revisit it again. And now that he has all the money and clarity that he needs, he knows he can. And I wonder if he has any regret about that. But I wonder where you would have taken it. Just them being there, landing, a small imprint. Where do you go from there if you were going to make your Avatar?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and some of it's kind of unclear. And, apologies to the people that have seen it 6 times. Maybe we missed some things. But, I mean, the first thing, you raise a good point, Kyle. I think an initial red flag back in the day of trailers for this film was like, oh, man, this is going to be some heavy-handed environmental message thing, and I just don't want to be preached to type of thing. Like, I'm down for the environment, obviously. I'm not some sinister dude, but I don't want to... When it's forced upon you and kind of like forced down your throat, it's just a bad look. And I don't know why I was getting that kind of energy from the trailers back in the day, but I definitely was. And it kind of is that. I mean, there's a lot of entertainment value there too. It's not just that, but there's definitely a piece of that definitely comes through in the final product. I like what you say. I think when they initially come in, and it sort of can almost read this way with what they already have there in the initial 15 minutes. Is like they come in and they find this resource, this unobtainium, right? Now we know already through exposition that they already wiped out the Earth. They stripped the Earth barren. Now they got to move on to other places and find resources there. So they find this lush moon. They're kind of exploiting it for its resources. They find this unobtainium, but maybe they go to these uninhabited parts of the moon first, and we get everything there. Now we find this rich deposit, which they mention in the Navi's domain underneath this giant tree, which is important for them, this sacred tree. There's all this unobtainium under the ground. Now we have to delve into parts of this moon that are dangerous, not with just the feral creatures, but with these tribal peoples, these clan of Navi. And so now we ramp up the tension, and now we really previously didn't even need a military presence, but now we're moving into other things where this could be potential danger. Now we could be fighting with these people, and we're unapologetically going in, and it's a slash and burn thing. We're just destroying everything, light it up, take what we want, get out with minimum casualty. I could see it going in that direction where it's like we tried to do it all over here, but now we need the rest of it, type of a thing, which makes sense. What was unclear to me, though, did you get this late into the film? I thought the Navi were the only people. Like I thought what are they? Omatakaya?
Yeah,
people?
Their tribe or whatever.
I thought that specific clan was it. I didn't know there were other tribes. I had no idea. It's when they start convening and sort of teaming up to fight the RDF or whatever it is, the RDA or whatever it is, the humans, that I realized, there's other people here too. It's not just Omatakaya. It's not, there's other tribes, there's other native peoples. But yeah, it's kind of strange. It leaves a lot of questions for sure. And it just becomes about, it seems like they shuffle off story, and then it just becomes about let's show the Banshees, let's show the Navi, let's show the way they fight, the way they live, this lush vegetation that's very, I don't know, I got a lot of underwater vibes, the tentacles and the tendrils and the iridescent vibrant colors and the jellyfish-like creatures. Let's show all this kind of stuff that we could, it's so exotic, right? It's this other world, this lush vegetation that looks like it's oceanic plants and stuff. I felt like there was a thing where it was just like, all right, now you're just showcasing the visual, and the story is taking a back seat. But again, like, I'm sure there is a lot of companion fiction and all that sort of thing. But if you're just watching a 2.5 hour movie, you are asking, all right, what about this? What about this? That type of thing. And again, I think because it set it, like you said, I think it set it off in a way that was very hopeful. Like, oh, this is going to be pretty cool. I'm down. And then you just kind of lose all of that because it becomes this, I don't know. And, maybe people dug that, that it just becomes this visual effects demo reel and drops some of the story. I mean, they kind of keep you hooked in with some of the acting, some of the performances. You have pretty prototypical bad guys and kind of the sinister element going on. And you have man versus nature and nature versus technology and all of these things. But yeah, it just becomes this whirlwind of visuals. And it's like, wait a second. In that sense, I just wonder if I'm too old or if I'm just dense, like am I not getting something? What's going on here?
Yeah.
Look over here. It's like,
right. It just seemed like it moved very, very fast with a lot of showcasing that it got denser and denser with that the further you got in, which is fine. I don't mind the flora and fauna and all that. I think that's a fun thing to explore. I just think it's vastly overexposed, and this movie really lacks pacing that I think would have really benefited just the tension, the theme, the characters. Like, I don't even know any of these characters. I don't care about any of these characters. I don't know them. You move so fast. And then I wanted to bring up a big problem, I think, with the story ultimately, and it was one of the last things I wrote in my notes, is that the savior of this race is a human. It seems as colonial as humanly possible. It almost undercuts its anti-colonial, anti-industry, maybe even modern Earth or modernity as we know it, industrialism. It all seems undercut by that very fact that the savior is just this dude who's a human. And I don't really understand how that's supposed to be uplifting in any way. It seems like they're worshiping, like this guy, he takes command of one of those amazing birds, and he's only like one of the 5 people that have ever done it or whatever. And I'm like, so you guys are amped that this human in a fake body that they made in a lab is your savior? And they kind of set you up to begin with. And I don't know, it just didn't really the culmination of it didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me either. What did you think about that? About the themes kind of being undercut by the savior prospect that is like at the center of one civilization's superiority to another is often this savior complex. And it seems like it's there even in the future, even in 2154 or whatever, with this human who becomes Navi. It's very strange, in my opinion.
It really is. And, it really just says really all it is. Now, this Marine, this paraplegic Marine who's injured, and, he's a young guy and he lost his brother, and, it elicits some empathy from the audience. And I get all that. And the whole dynamic about, he can, in this other world, when he channels this other self through this scientific technology that developed, he could actually use his legs again. And so that would be something for him to really relish. I get all that. But really all it's saying about the character, despite his bravery and courage and everything, is that all it takes is somebody who's actually sympathetic and unselfish, right? Because if the humans went about this a little differently, they might be able to get what they want and also have an ally. But it seems to be saying 2 things I realized early on. This is kind of channeling the origins of America, I think, when people came over and took the land from the Native Americans, right? That's one thing. This is kind of echoing that story largely. And the other thing is, with this main character, with our protagonist, I think what they're saying is that it only he's kind of like the buffer between the 2 groups of people, between the humans and between the Navi. And that really all it took was that sort of liaison between the 2. And that's who this character is. But it begs the question for why did he, if he was this sort of Marine who can't do what he used to do, right? He's a young guy who lost the use of his legs. Why didn't he consider this, going down this route before his brother died, right, to take his place. And the other thing is, it's kind of talking out of two sides of your mouth, because the humans developed this technology or this ability in order to, I don't know, ingratiate themselves with the domestic people, right, with the Na'vi, in order to sort of earn their trust and then ultimately break it. But it also says they had to do this because the atmosphere on Pandora is toxic to humans, right? So which one is it? Is it both? I don't understand. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think they're really clear about that. There's a little something in there too, where it's like, yeah, they have to do this in order to fool the people, but they also kind of have to do this because in order for us to be down there, it's the only way. We can't breathe the air. We'll die in minutes. Right. And also the low gravity situation and all these other things. So it was it could have been a little more demonstrative one way or the other. And I think it could have been a little clearer, but it sets up this hero who really, unfortunately, what I feel like it's saying is like, isn't this guy amazing? Look how courageous he is, despite the use of his legs. Like, that's the characteristic they're leaving this guy with, because really what they're saying, anybody could have done what he did. You know what I mean? You're kind of playing up that angle, and it's just, I don't know. It's a little childish. I think you said it right. It's a little bit, I don't know. It's amateur storytelling a little bit, you know, it doesn't make for the best hero. It's a little bit, I don't know. I think this movie plays to kids a lot. You know, it's PG-13. There's some stuff that's a little heavier in terms of the violence, although a lot of it's largely off screen. A lot of it's kind of cartoonish. There's obviously people dying, but it happens largely. It's not graphic. But I think a lot of it's made to appeal to kids. And I think that's what we're left with. I think what I'm saying is it's a very one-dimensional hero. It didn't need to be that way. He could have been a more complex character and a more interesting character.
Yeah, I'm looking up the rating for the sequel, but I'm not coming up with that.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, because it's funny. There definitely is a shade of the Age of Discovery and the interaction with the Spanish and later other Portuguese and English and whatever French with the Indian population here, the native populations here in North and South America. But I actually got even bigger Africa, like Scramble for Africa, 19th century post Age of Discovery vibes, in the sense that the corporation, it's really six of one, half dozen of the other, but the corporation was really, and I thought this was kind of a clever part of the storytelling, was that the RDA or whatever this company is they keep saying, and that Giovanni Ribisi guy, the character rather that he plays, not that guy. He's obviously in a well-known actor and many other things, so no disrespect to him, but he says something along the lines of like, we gave them roads and schools and taught them things. Like, what else do they want from us? And that's like a post Age of Discovery, more grounded 19th century or 20th century. What can we do for you to get good PR back home so we can ultimately exploit you, regardless of the value of those things? And that the people there, the Na'vi, have no value. Like, they don't want anything from these people. There's nothing they want from them. And that's really, really interesting. And I think that that's a cool thing they could have taken advantage of in different ways too. So I just think slow rolling it and because the one thing I was curious about when Mike and I were going back and forth, I'm like, when do you think this takes place? And I eventually realized it's timestamped many times when they're doing the video segments, the science research and all of that. But they say it in the movie too. And then we looked it up, and I was like, because I'm like, this strikes me as the 2500s or even later. And she was like, oh, it's 2154. And I'm like, that in and of itself doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And so in other words, the time from the very origin of the story, everything's like very truncated and fast. How the fuck did we do all of that in 150 years from when the movie came out to, I'm not saying we're not going to have starships and I'm sure we're going to do all of those things, but it suggests that we've almost been on that in Pandora itself for decades, if not longer. At that point, there's an establishment, there's this unobtainium there and all the rest. It just seemed everything's so fast. It would have been cool if you kept the same time frame, but it was just primitive. You guys have been there for a few years. You're one of the first reinforcements. Everything's kind of been established. Now you got to figure out how to survive. Frontier kind of philosophies that can go into that. And a lot of people would say, well, then the movie's just not for you. And maybe that is the case, because to me, the Avatar part of it is stupid. Like it's that is actually an inhibiting agent to getting the most out of this film, I think, in some way. And people again would say like, well, that's what the movie's about. And I'm like, well, fair enough. But why is it about? So in all of this time too, they managed to backwards, make this genetic form and this back the tank of a creature that then they interface with men. I'm like, this is insane. How did this all happen so quickly? And why is this looked at as the best way to go forward? It would be much cooler, especially with the scale of the characters and the creatures, if they just interacted with each other, from the beginning as that, without having to do this intermediary thing where you're sleeping. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Yeah, I know I'm beating up on the film a lot for something I think is just fine, but it just doesn't work for me. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, I think you raise a lot of good points, man. It's definitely a lot of Inception. It's a lot of concepts that anime developed. I mean, was already being developed in anime and manga dating back to the 70s. And we could talk about that a little later if you want to. I understand it feels too, it's not far flung enough, because it feels like we achieved all this stuff over a very short amount of time. And we're already in this era that they feel very situated in. So I like the idea of combining human DNA with alien DNA, in this case, the Na'vi, but maybe play up the angle that that's sort of what the humans have developed as their way in to these other places they need to mine for resources. Like, let's combine our DNA with whatever native DNA is in these other places. And that's our way of surviving in this place, but also kind of sneakily ingratiating ourselves and kind of pretending to befriend the natives, or maybe in some cases fighting more warlike natives, or whatever it is in each exclusive case, and sort of play up that angle. Like, in other words, does this evil corporation, or in this case, branch of the government, like a Wayland Yutani and Aliens, where it's just solely about the bottom line? It's about developing the technology, getting the money, fuck whoever's in the way type of thing. But are the humans doing this in other places, right? Or is this a thing that's exclusive to just this place, just Pandora, just the Na'vi? Yeah, there's a lot there. And I love the idea of what you said of these specific people. Like, maybe the humans are used to doing this. Like, this is their tactic. And this is the way they get what they want from different places. But with the Na'vi, it's tough because there's no negotiating with them. As you said, it's such a different lifestyle. They're not reliant on any kind of human technology. They have a complete different set of values. There's nothing that the humans, even futuristic humans, prosperous humans, could offer these people that they would be even remotely interested in. They don't need it. We don't need your earthly education. We don't need your earthly stuff. You're not welcome here. And so the humans have to develop this thing of like, well, then we're going to take it. And this is the first time we've ever had to deal with that, where it's not like the Na'vi are warlike or want to fight, but they just don't want to give up what they have or what's underneath what's important to them. Just go somewhere else. And the humans won't. That's interesting, because there's no platform for any kind of mediation in this case. There's just, the answer is no. And then how do the humans deal with that? Well, we never had to do this before. Now we got to call in the military. Now we need the mech and the tech and the missiles and the rockets and all this type of thing. I kind of like that too, where it's like, play up that angle where it's like, well, what do we do? Is there any way to get to these people without fighting? Explore that. It's interesting. There's a lot of different ways you could go, but again, it feels like this clamoring towards, no, we just have to show these people. We have these badass, I don't know, part Native American or tribal humans, think Aztec or Mayans or whatever you want to say, right? Maybe even Egyptians, kind of half that, half elf.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
Right. And then this is it. This is what we're going to show. They got blue skin. They kind of have these feral, like feline type features. They look like cats a little bit. They move like cats. They have the agility of cats. They're very in tune with nature. It just felt like that's what they were trying to get at. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. The other stuff doesn't matter. You have the evil corporation led by, in this case, Giovanni Ribisi, in Aliens, it's Burke, right? So you have the same thing. It echoes a lot of what's come before with James Cameron, sort of early James Cameron with Aliens and stuff, and then large scope. We got to do a big Titanic James Cameron, In a way, it's interesting because I didn't know we were going to do this, and I watched Titanic recently on a whim. And when you watch that movie, it's not bad. I love Leo. I mean, it's a good movie.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in a year, and probably since the late 90s, but I remember liking it.
Yeah, it's good. It's a very likable movie in a lot of ways. There's a lot to say about it, but it is that sort of, it's the movie that empowered James Cameron to only do big things and wait large amounts of time between projects. Because once he had that Titanic money, baby, that fueled everything to come after. And I would argue that started, the scope started to get bigger with True Lies, which was like mid 90s. Right. And then that was a sure sign. That was a foreshadowing of okay, we're going to leave Terminator and the Abyss and Aliens, and we're going off to, box office land. That's kind of what this feels like. And I don't know which James Cameron we're getting, because you got the purist filmmaking James Cameron, who seems to be a storyteller, and then you have the technological side again, which isn't bad, but you don't want to do technology at the cost of everything else.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's just not the way that we've learned. That's just not the way to do it. We all know this now.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate that I think that all the elements are there for something much better than what this movie ends up being, because I just think they overcomplicate it. I'm not even really crazy about the whole mysticism. It's cool that the Na'vi call them the Sky People, and they have their own religion and their own traditions, but that they have this world tree type trope in there, and they're using these weird hair tendrils. I find that whole hair thing very unsettling. I do not like it. I just find it's very weird. It's very strange. That is an idea. That's like a George Lucas thing or something, where you'd be like, all right, reel it back in. You don't have to go that far. It doesn't have to be like that. Like you said, it could have been a psychic connection, or it could just been something natural. When the conquistadors let horses out into the continent, in South America and then ultimately North America, the Indians weren't communing with them. They fucking rode them bareback. They broke them, and that's super cool in and of itself, that these guys know how to break an animal without having to do this weird. I just don't understand any of that element, why that shit is necessary here. At the same time, it's so everything is to the extreme, as we said earlier, right? That's to the extreme. The human's response, you would think that though think about it, they're far separated from Earth. They can't communicate in real time with Earth. It would take years for them to talk back and forth, right? So they have to make all of their decisions in real time. And I get that. And that in and of itself is cool and horror laden. Every person you lose, every item you lose, every piece of food that's eaten, everything is truncating smaller and smaller as you have to get your shit done here. And that creates a sense of urgency for the humans. But even then, why does it have to be so comic book like? You would think that they would come there. I know that I'm really breaking this movie down, and I don't mean to be so mean to it, but it's just, if the humans came from an Earth that they destroyed, they would, I don't know that they would be so cavalier. Again, I understand the idea of saying well, we fucked up our place, we'll just fuck up whatever and get what we need. But certainly the people in charge of these different endeavors would have a different point of view than just doing it again. It just seems too on the nose, villain for villain's sake kind of behavior. So like I said, they're just going to the life tree or whatever in these huge machines. It's why do you have to clear cut your way to the life? That doesn't make any sense. You're just clear cutting your way from your base with huge things that are many, 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 many times the size of a road that you would need to just bring things back and forth. It just doesn't make any, why do you have to go so extra? Oh, you're attacking the tree again with just ordnance, like Dresden style firebomb on this tree. You would think that they would have a curiosity to get that tree intact, right? Wouldn't you? Why? Or you would want to do it without fucking things too much. I mean, they throw the gas canisters into the tree, right? It would be cool if that worked and they cleared all the Na'vi out and they escape into the woods, and they have that scene where it's everyone back into the woods and they all run away. And it would be cool if the humans went in there and started to discover some of the naturalism or whatever, and maybe commune with it a little bit more and see it for what it is. But the gas has irreparably poisoned the tree. And so the tree ends up dying anyway. And there's just great trauma around that. Like, build it up and make it. It's just everything's so extreme. And I don't know if that's what in some way, colonialism is that. But in another way, when the English landed in the 1500s in Virginia or whatever, they weren't clear cutting. Not that they had the mechanisms to do that. The Indians were the ones that were doing way more clear cutting than them. They were just trying to survive in these little spaces, and really playing that era or that level of colonialism up, I think would have just been so much more cool. And maybe he felt like that would have been too many shades of Aliens, especially. But
yeah,
but at the
I could see that.
But at the same time, it's like, dude, I don't know. You didn't need all of these steps and this intermingling and the earth fucking tying people up with the little tendrils. And I don't know.
It's very simplistic. It's all boiled down to a very simplistic good versus evil, no gray, all black, all white thing. And I guess, that's a choice, but there is a lot of interesting ways you could go with that. And also just like the demonstrative or the drastic difference in technological capabilities when the humans come with these gunships and nukes and all this badass technology. And you have a primitive people who are still fighting with spears and bows and arrows, and just sort of that reckoning of like, oh, people exist like this. Oh, people exist like this. It's beyond nature versus technology. It even gets into other things of just a learning curve. Like we didn't know the gas was going to destroy that tree. It offers up a little more, I guess it gives you a little more dimension, a little more texture, and all that sort of thing. I mean, who did it really well with just, I don't know, primitive people that lived close to the land, that valued their relationship with nature and being in touch with the elements. Tolkien did it with the elves. It was never really explained. These are a man-like humanoid type creature with immortality that really valued their relationship and their proximity to nature, to Middle Earth. And via their sort of values, obtain this power to harness that for magic. Remember when Arwen saves Frodo rather, from the Black Riders, right? And channels that water magic in the river. It's never explained. She's just an elf. You know what I mean? Like that's her power. And it's never this type of thing where it's the source of this power is Rivendell and this thing under Rivendell. It's never done like that. There's a mystique. There's a mystery to it. There's something unexplained. There's, it's magic. It's magic. That's it, And I'm not saying it had to be like that in this case, but yeah, it feels like it's really hitting you over the head. But I think a lot of it really does come down to just trying to make it accessible for as wide an audience as possible, right? You're not trying to do this thing where, I don't know, it's not as elegant as The Lord of the Rings. But I do think if you take out little things, it's like the metachlorians in Star Wars. If you just take that out, if you just take the hair tendril plugging into each other thing out of this, I think it becomes a third better just by taking that out. Like you didn't need that. Something a little more, I guess elegant really is the right word, whether that's psychic, some psychic unexplainable power, some mental link you have with the creatures and the flora and the fauna of this place, whatever it is. It could have been, I just think that's better storytelling. And I just think, that was really, it's kind of weird. It's one of those things. Like, I just think of like even the animators sitting around looking at dailies and looking at those scenes of like those pipe cleaner things coming out with the hair or whatever. It's, first of all, it's gross.
Yeah, it's fucking gross, dude.
And it also plays up, I couldn't help thinking about, oh, that's a penis and a vagina. Like, it's just kind of weird.
Yeah, it's phallic.
Nobody said that.
Yeah.
It could be beautifully animated, but who wants to see that?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's interesting in some sense that, again, that's one of the cool things about the movie is to imagine another ecosystem of separate evolution based on the parameters of the specific planet, the makeup of the atmosphere, the specific gravity of it. Do they ever get into what the gravity of the planet is? That's something I asked Mike. I don't know if they ever said it in passing. That's all based on the mass of the object. So Earth's very specific gravity is not going to be replicated anywhere else. It's going to be off by a little bit, even if the planet is about the same size. You can imagine that you would notice if you were on a planet with 5% weirder gravity, you would notice immediately probably. So I wonder what that would have been like. There's just all sorts of things they could have explained, I guess, but I agree.
Low grav, right?
What'd you say?
It was low gravity, so hence the size of these people. They're 10 feet tall.
Yeah, they're growing larger because of the lower gravity, presumably.
Right.
Yeah.
And the native plants, could all grow. Everything could grow larger there. The creatures, the plants, because of that low gravity, that's a great atmosphere. That's a great environment.
It doesn't read like that, though. It doesn't read like any different atmosphere than the Earth. I mean, that's a huge aesthetic miss in the movie. It doesn't look any different. I don't know how they would have done it. Maybe you can like overcrank the footage or something and make, I don't know, but they don't move differently.
No.
So that doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah, that's weird. That is strange. And I guess, unless I'm misreading it, I think that was the intent. That's why everything's bigger here. That's why it's so not only the toxic air and atmosphere, but that's why everything. This is not really a place for humans. This is almost like going back to the land of dinosaurs, also with people, tribal peoples that also don't want you there. It's like going back to the land of dinosaurs, also with vicious cavemen.
Yeah, exactly.
This is not a place.
It's cool. I mean, I love the vision of this foreign ecosystem, the bioluminescence and the huge, like you said, the huge flora, especially the hammerhead creature. There's a lot of cool stuff. Just to imagine,
for sure.
Think about Earth's evolution and all the remarkable creatures that we have. These are all basically mistakes that end up working within their niche such that they flourish. And so why wouldn't that happen somewhere else? I mean, we even know on Earth that vision has been arrived at evolutionarily separately on separate occasions. So you would imagine things like this are probably common with whatever Mother Nature, whatever mechanisms and levers Mother Nature is pulling at. It's very interesting. So I do like that element of the but again, like the gravity, you see, again, it's so complicated. It doesn't need to be that complicated. We have giant trees on the Earth. You don't need to. What would have been interesting about this moon Pandora around this gas giant Alpha Centauri is, wow, this is really Earth-like. Why does it have to be so complicated?
We found another Earth.
Yeah, like we found basically a planet and they could have explained it's at 97% the mass of Earth, and but the trees cycle nitrogen into whatever, fucking ammonia or whatever it could be, and which is possible. I think Titan has ammonia rain, right, and stuff like that. The moon of Saturn.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I didn't know that.
So, and there's like rivers of whatever methane, and like that's cool. Like that's real, but I don't know. Make you be like it's somehow the same size and it's around a gas giant. By the way, the gas giant would just be emitting massive amounts of radiation. So you would have to explain that as well.
Yeah, that thing is huge.
And it's so, again, the visual of it is dope.
Love it.
And I would have liked to have known more about. And again, it could have been during times where I was phasing out for a minute at a time, getting bored with it, but I don't think so. Where it's like, what is your religion, or what do you guys say about this thing in the sky and the moons and what? But it's very cool. But we know from Jupiter and Saturn that if you're that close to these things, you're gonna get fried. So you have to kind of explain that stuff as well. It's cool though. It's all dope. And it doesn't all have to be realistic, but I think that it's like they're on the goal line in football, and they're running like a 25-yard play. It's like, that doesn't even make any sense. Like, you don't need to just run the ball right down the middle.
You just
need 1 yard. Just run the ball down the middle. You don't need to do some sort of elaborate play here. And that's, I think, the frustrating part about it is like the setup. It's all good. The Avatar thing I'm not into. I'm just not into the fucking, like we said, the tendril thing. I'm not into I don't know, man. I feel like I'm really being mean to the movie. I don't mean to be. I just didn't. I didn't think it was bad. It was fine.
No, it's not bad. No. It's definitely not bad. It's just and again, like definitely relieved and pleased that it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Definitely more entertaining and definitely more watchable than I thought it was going to be. Just like kind of a headache. Again, it's kind of inexplicable. I don't even know why I felt that way necessarily. Bits and pieces, but it has this old school sci-fi philosophy of, I think you summed it up really well. Like, oh, we can make it Earth-like. But there's this thing of, well, we've already done giant sycamores and redwoods in CG. Like, we need to do something more exotic. We need to make it look like an alien world. Like I always think of 1950s sci-fi, right. Like the plants look like octopus tentacles and shit. It's like everything, it's almost like the Jetsons, like that crazy, like everything has a ring around it. Like, it doesn't need to be that way. Sometimes sci-fi could be more grounded, and not everything is cyberpunk. Like, I get it. You know, I definitely have a bias when it comes to science fiction flavors. But yeah, it would be refreshing to see that sophistication. But it is, especially 15 years ago almost, it is kind of hard to think that you're not just trying to show something that looks different than what, you know, something that looks unexpected, something that looks completely unearth-like, you know, and that's the bent. That's the whole conceit, is like, no, it looks like underwater, but above ground. Isn't that crazy? There's pink plants and iridescent purple trees and shit.
I do like when they're
jellyfish
stepping on the moss and it's like lighting up and all of that.
Yeah.
There's some cool things. It's
cool,
but it's just so much. And they have like ferns and pine trees and all these kinds of things. You don't have to, I don't know. One thing I do like about the movie a lot is the aesthetic of the humans, the human gear, the human helicopters and gunships and missile launchers and the mechs that they use. So the mechs, I was like, I wonder if Respawn was inspired by this for Titanfall, because it's so similar in some way to that. Although I don't think humans riding mechs is the Titanfall didn't invent that, or Avatar, but just the way it looks to me, like this specific, it's not Japanese at all. It's like the cool thing with like the AR visuals of the guy like actually holding the gun and using his arms and acting as if like when he's shooting. It's super cool. I think that is dope. I love that. I love the helicopter gunships. What's her name? Michelle Rodriguez.
Yes.
The pilot. Not Micah had brought up. God, it's like the same character in everything, whether it's Lost or fucking Fast and Furious. It's like everything is the same character.
She's hilarious.
Literally no range as far as I can tell, but that's fine.
She does smile in this.
Yeah.
That's refreshing.
Yeah, but it's just like the gum chomping fucking badass. It's like, all right, man. Like, okay, so she's in it. That's fine. And I love the huge gunships. I mean, it gives me mega G.I. Joe vibes, the different vehicles, and a game I really love from Platinum called Vanquish. It also reminded me a lot of that. I think that whole aesthetic and all of that was very well done. And that's the cool part of the movie to me, is unfortunately is the more villainous humans and their use of technologies, which really could have been the focus. And of course you need the alien Na'vi. And I should say, Dig, as far as the Na'vi are concerned, I don't hate the designs. I find them unsettling, but it's an alien creature. And like you said, you adjust to it over time. I do appreciate that they went out of their way not to make them like gray aliens or just weird, scary fucking Mass Effect Reapers or something. You know, they made them normal or some sort of feline thing, suggesting, I guess, that would be a common clade or whatever in exobiology. So the aesthetic's pretty cool, but I was curious what you thought about the human aesthetic. I loved those gunships and all the different missile launchers and all the different guns. It was dope. Loved it.
So cool. And it reflected a lot of what you saw from the visuals in Aliens. And I don't know if that's down to Stan Winston and their visual development, sort of conceptual influence, but it really, like when you see those, you know, the human aircraft, it feels like the bug stomper dropship from Aliens, like really kind of echoes futuristic, but still sort of grounded in what we already know, whether that's down to like the olive green, like the army green color of things, or, you know, the illustrations on the side of the ship or the notches. It looks, there's a definitely like a fixed aesthetic to it that's really cool. It just looks really pleasing. It looks futuristic, but sort of badass and kind of believable. The spaceships too, like it just looked like an evolution, a pretty drastic evolution of the space shuttles, but you know, kind of looks like an extension of what you think we might have, you know, 150-ish years from now, which was kind of cool. I like the design in this film from soup to nuts. I think it was all really cool as far as the tech, as far as the mech. Sometimes I'm a little sort of, I don't know, I could be a little harsh if I'm criticizing the mech, because I just always go back. My sort of flashpoint for a lot of science fiction is anime. And I was into it when I was a little kid. And I just think the Japanese anime and manga versions of mech mechanical suits, robots, whatever you want to say, is so much more advanced and so much more elegant. If I think about something like, let's say, Neon Genesis Evangelion, right? Like if I think of Evangelion, which came before this movie, by the way, like they were already doing such elegant things with mech suits and robot suits that were fast and agile and elegant and had a very streamlined design aesthetic. And then I think, but there also is sort of an American mech flavor. I think of things like Pacific Rim, which is a little more like this, a little more chunky, a little more blocky, a little more believable, a little bit of something that anime might have been doing in the 60s, but it has a very Western flavor to it. Like if it was more, if the humans showed up in this movie in things that were more modern or contemporary, like a mobile suit, like a Gundam, right? It would just look weird. It doesn't fit the level of technology. So sometimes I got to slow my roll with that and just be like, all right, like I understand this is kind of like the chunky, funky version of a mech, but it is more believable. It actually calls up the loader, right? Like the loader from Aliens that she uses at the end to battle the Queen. So yeah, it was really cool. And not just the tech and the mech and the aircraft and the guns and all that kind of thing, which again really echoed, I think, an extension of what we saw in Aliens, which was so ahead of its time, man. It just was, which is so cool. But also, you know, the creature design, I thought of Final Fantasy a couple of times in this, watching this movie. You know, you have the sixth, it seemed like every creature, every wild creature had 6 legs, right? And I automatically think of Final Fantasy did that first with Odin's horse. Remember Odin's horse had the 2 front legs, sort of this alien beast, something that was a little off-worldly. I kind of like that. But consistency, like their version of a zebra and their version of a meerkat all had 6 appendages. That was really cool. And just kind of like their dragons, the Banshee, I thought, you know, has multiple wings. Sometimes I have a couple of sets of eyes. It reminded me of Bahamut. You know, it was like, oh, that's pretty cool. It looks like a dragon, but you could see the raptor influence. There's some dinosaur, maybe a little Godzilla kaiju thing. It's all blended together. Really thoughtful designs as far as the creature. And the Na'vi, they grew on me, man. I understand the philosophy with, at first it's a little off-putting because you get a lot of the human characteristics through the mocap. And it wasn't a purely animated thing. They channel a lot of the human actor's performance into the CG version. And this was one of the first times we're really getting that. Maybe the first time we're getting that in a feature film. And at first it's a little weird because you're seeing a lot of that nuance of the actual performance come through the CG version, the CG standee. But it's, after a while you get acclimated to it. And I like the kind of philosophy of we have to make these human-like creatures. So we're going to borrow from Robotech, who did this with the Zentradi in the early 80s, where it's like they're humanoid, but they're much larger than humans. But essentially they look like humans. And we're also going to do it, well, like, we're not going to make them unappealing. Like, what's something to integrate into this design to make a human say, oh, I wish I looked like that, you know? And then the cat-like features, the big eyes, and that specific face, you know, the facial proportions and everything, they're strangely attractive in that they're exotic. And you could see a human being, oh, I wish I looked like that. You know, it's kind of like the best version of a cat and a person, you know, and it's not some weird, doesn't come across as some weird furry cosplay thing. Right. They sort of toe the line and they make it work. But it is a little weird to get used to. And again, it operates much better in feature film format with the story context than just watching clips of it. I just thought the clips of it 15 years ago were so off-putting. I was like, what the fuck is this? I don't understand what this is. And the fact that they kind of, at least the one guy, our hero, is kind of that thing somehow makes it better too, because it's kind of like he's part human and part Na'vi. You don't get that from a trailer. So again, the story context does help with that. But they grew on me. I was worried about that too. And at first it's like, oh, it's weird. And she's doing a weird thing too, where she's kind of growling like a rabid animal and, you know, baring her teeth and stuff.
Like
and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's weird. I don't know. Let's work up into it, you know. But after a while you get acclimated.
Do you have any performances you want to call out in this? I think one of my major like high end problems with this movie is just I didn't connect with any of the characters. I just didn't really care very much about any of them. We get it. We know who the good guys and the bad guys are and the tensions that exist there. Like I thought, but things again move so suddenly. Like he's suddenly, Jake Sully is suddenly calling that guy brother. Like he just comes back, like he banged the girl or whatever in the woods, and he just comes back and just starts calling. It's like, damn, where is any of the exposition? How is this movie so long and you guys don't take any time to talk it through? So I don't know. I don't feel like
I would be mad, right?
What'd you say?
I would be mad if I was that warrior captain. Like you're coming in here, you're kind of taking all the glory and you're stealing the girl. Like I understood that guy's perspective.
You're banging my sister?
He was pissed.
So what do you have anything? I have nothing really to say about any of the characters. I got to be totally honest with you. That's not what's interesting to me about this film at all.
I do understand that though. They're very one-dimensional. They serve a purpose. It's very surface level. Again, it's very black and white. I like what you said early on about vanilla. It's vanilla bean at best. But what character was interesting for me? The main character. I didn't recognize him. I know he's been in other stuff. I think he was in Clash of the Titans.
Sam Worthington.
Yeah. Sam Worthington. Hacksaw Ridge, which I definitely saw but didn't remember him from.
Yeah, I don't know what he plays in that. That movie was...
must be a smaller part.
Yeah, I don't remember, but that movie was.
Right?
I thought that movie was remarkable when I saw it. I loved that movie.
Oh, that's a great movie. I mean, that's Mel Gibson, right? That's Mel. So
yeah, Jack Glover. So he's an important character. I don't know.
I have to go back.
Yeah, I don't remember
and look
either.
at that.
But I remember.
I
really
never saw
that
Terminator Salvation either, which maybe we'll do someday for Knockback and extending our Terminator series. But you know what was cool about him? I couldn't help but see like he felt like a sort of a mashup of like a slightly less silly or goofy Chris Pratt and a slightly less handsome Chris Evans. He seemed like part Star-Lord, part Captain America, but kind of a version blending of those two to me, like a regular guy version of those two, like a lower rent version.
Yeah, I'm looking at him. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
It kind of worked though, because you know what was cool about it? The fact that I didn't recognize him from other roles kind of it preserved the illusion for me. I wasn't thinking about him as somebody else, and I thought he did a really good job. And then when I found out he was Australian, he's a native Australian, I was like, wow, because I could never do what these guys do with affecting an accent that's not native to me. That would be whether it was English, Australian, or otherwise. I could never do it. So I give him a lot of props. I think he was good. Again, I think he operates as a good regular guy, someone you could just get behind. And the type of thing was interesting too with making him this injured, this paraplegic. And they didn't really explore this, or they didn't really give it too much more exposition. But the fact of like, we're so far into the future now where it's hinted at that humans could fix this. Like if you have a spinal injury of this degree, it could be fixed for the right price. It's very expensive. So in order to do, by doing this, in turn, they were going to fix his legs, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, and it plays up the capitalism run amok kind of stuff, which is cool.
Yeah. And it's, they don't go too crazy with it, and it doesn't ever happen because he ends up staying there and he has the use of his legs anyway because he's becoming this other thing or staying in this other place. But that was interesting. And the other guy that was probably the most interesting to me was the maybe friend, maybe foe character, that Colonel Miles Quaritch.
Yeah, he was cool. Character. I loved his digital camo, very 80s. I loved it. Reminds me of the G.I. Joe recoil. But I loved his aesthetic.
The pixel camo.
Yeah, the pixel camo with the and I love that scene where he he's shooting the machine. He just walks out into the toxic air and just starts shooting the machine guns. It's fucking dope. And then takes out his pistol and starts shooting him. The guy comes out with his mask. That was probably one of my favorite scenes actually.
And they do a thing too where like that character, the Colonel, and the Sigourney Weaver character, the Doctor, Dr. Grace, they don't, in the beginning, they do that sleight of hand where it's like, which one's going to be the villain? I don't know. One's the military. She's kind of got the chip on her shoulder and he's nice at first and then it flip-flops, which is, I know that's kind of become like a trope in movies, but I kind of like when they do that. And he just felt like a cartoony villain to me, like that military tough. He's got the giant facial anime scar, had that I know James Cameron's a big anime dude, so I know he's looking at things like that. He incorporates things like that, which I appreciate. And, you know, he's just the type that thinks with his gun. And, you know, there's that moment where he's literally on fire in this at the end. And he doesn't even bother to douse himself off. He just gets in his mech. He's still on fire. Then he realizes, all right, I better put myself out. You know, that type of thing. I like cartoony shit like that. You know, that's just fun. And Sigourney Weaver, man, what can you say? She'll always be Ripley for me. I know Ghostbusters came first. I get it. But, you know, Alien and Aliens, come on, man. Every time I see her, I just think of like, okay, that's Ripley. That's just another version of Ripley. That's how I'm thinking.
Wait, what do you mean Ghostbusters came first? Alien is older than...
Alien came first, but
Aliens. Oh yeah, after. Yeah, Aliens
right?
would be 8. What is that? 86.
Ghostbusters.
I think Aliens.
I think. Yeah. The Aliens and Ghostbusters was pretty close though.
Yeah, 80. What was it? Ghostbusters 85, right, or 84, and then Aliens I think is 86. I think.
Yeah, like it was pretty close. They came within a couple of years.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, 86. Right. But you know that it's always good to see her. And then Giovanni Ribisi, man, there's something about him. I don't get enough of him. I know he does more TV, and I'm not in tune with his TV. It's the Sneaky Pete, right? He's on that show. There's something really weird about him. I mean, he plays kind of the one-dimensional, greedy, unsympathetic villain, right? It's the bottom line at the cost of everything else.
Yeah, he plays Seth Davis in one of my very favorite movies, actually, from my childhood, which is Boiler Room. Long Island's own Boiler Room.
Oh, I gotta watch that again.
I love that movie.
You bring that up sometimes.
That was one of my first DVDs. I love that movie. That was like a classic Long Island movie with like kids my age because it took place there. And he was like he was like a shady stockbroker.
Yeah, I remember that movie.
And that's who else is in that? Vin Diesel is in that. Ben Affleck is in it.
Yes.
Ben Affleck has that awesome scene that I love where he throws his key, he walks into the table and throws his keys on walks in the room, throws his keys on the table. He's like, and he go and talking shit.
You have that. Yeah. That's early. That's pretty early. Ben Affleck,
and he says,
too.
Anyone who says, he says something like, people who make fun of not having any money never had any, or something like that, or pretend that it doesn't matter, never had any, which is an amazing line. So yeah, I that's what I will always see him through that. And I thought the casting of that other guy, do I have it in here? Let me see. The other Avatar guy that was going with him, like the nerdier dude.
Oh yeah, the what's his name?
I can't find him here in my
hold on, I got it here.
See. Is it this?
Norm Spellman.
Oh yeah, Joel David Moore.
Yeah.
Yep. And Micah made a good point, and I realized it too. That's JP from Grandma's Boy, so that's how what I'll always see him as. But what I thought was really interesting about that was he must have been cast in this role like around the time Grandma's Boy came out. And so it's funny that he was just, he's just a random actor that ended up in this. And he was a little distracting to me just because that voice is AP, but it was fine. I mean, he was fine. I don't know.
He's a little out of place. You know what he reminds me of? This is weird. And again, I don't even know how to explain. It's a little inexplicable, so I'm sorry, but he just reminds me of Matthew Lillard, like the guy who plays Shaggy in the live action Scooby-Doo. Right. I don't know what it is.
I can see that.
I knew you were going to bring up Grandma's Boy. I didn't remember him from that, oddly. And we did that.
Yeah, he plays like the nerdy programmer, you know?
That's right. I remembered him from Dodgeball.
Yeah, he's in Dodgeball as well, which is before that even. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's great. But you know what's weird about Giovanni Ribisi? I realized this. He's in Lost in Translation, which is probably top 50 movies for me. And he plays like the Spike Jonze character in that, who's supposed to be Spike Jonze. And I'll always love him for that. And of course, he's in Saving Private Ryan, too. He plays Doc. But he does this weird thing, man, that I realized in this movie. If you guys watch him in any performance, just check this out and see what I'm talking about. He low-key chews the scenery in such a restrained, like half-lidded way. I've never seen it before. Because usually when you think of somebody chewing the scenery, you think of like somebody who's more dynamic and physical, like Pacino, right? Or Kevin Spacey. Or somebody who really, Mel Gibson's a great example. He could really do, especially in his Lethal Weapon.
It's a horse blanket.
Yeah, the Patriot's a great example, actually. You know, it's somebody who's just like all eyes on him. It's not even maybe necessarily intentional. It's just the way they are. They just have this magnetism, right? he does it in this understated way, Giovanni Ribisi, that's so strange. Like, he plays such a great slime ball because it seems like but it's not with the usual effort you're used to seeing somebody chew the scenery, right? He does it in this does it with his face. He just plays like a really great cocky, somebody who's just completely out for self, like an out and out unsympathetic villain. That's what he feels like to me. So he was well cast. He's a guy I would like to see more. I just think he has a great range, and he's one of those actors who you don't see a lot. I just feel like I don't see him enough. So the cast was good. And again, like, working these various actors and actresses into their mocap proxy was really new. That was a really new thing for 2009, because typically it would be a complete CG thing, like something we would see from back then or even later in a video game, right? But there's in no way but they really, the human part of that, golf ball suit, green screen and all, gets lost to the CG version. But in this, it's integrated. Somehow they integrate it, whether that's Weta or the technology that they had to develop and put off for 15 years. But it's really interesting. And I think there's a lot less uncanny valley than I was expecting. They do a relatively good job with it. You could see some things are a little jerky and not as fluid as maybe they could be. But it was definitely way ahead of its time, and I think it holds up pretty well still.
Yeah,
I'm interested to see the second one and how it's evolved visually from being only a year ago.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the second one, just to see how it looks as well. That's why I was interested in looking at the trailer, because I couldn't care less when that thing was announced. I didn't watch anything about it, but yeah, the look, the aesthetic is not a problem I have with the movie. I think they did a pretty nice job. The compositing is really good. When they do composite, a lot of it is Jar Jar Binks like in the filming him with the golf balls, like you said. And I think that they were even showing off a little bit with some of the lighting and shadowing that they were able to kind of accomplish. But just imagine the rendering of this movie. I mean, I can't even imagine how long it took and the processing power that it took to bake all this thing down. And I'm sure it's even more complicated now, but I think that it holds up fairly well. There are parts of it that look totally fake and totally dumb, but generally speaking, it looks really strong actually for the time period. And it was very expensive. You can't do this stuff. The only thing that's going to look better than this now are obviously the newer CG stuff, but also just doing it practically. But you can't do a lot of this stuff that you're trying to do practically. Put people in suits and stuff like that. I just don't think maybe you could. I mean, Star Wars does that pretty convincingly, or did, but I don't know. It would look kind of silly, especially if you want to do the scale. You would need a bunch of Peter Mayhew type dudes running around in these suits and all of that. And I don't think that would with, even taller heads above them, and they would see through the chest or some shit. I don't know. It would look dumb. So I think that they did the best they could. I'm curious to know what the mainline vision is through this, and how 5 movies, if they're all move that fast, you're telling like fucking eon of stories. I'm reading, by the way, the Wikipedia for the fictional universe of Avatar.
Okay.
And it says, in the film, Pandora is depicted as being located in the Alpha Centauri A system. It is one of many natural satellites orbiting the gas giant Polyphemus, named for the Polyphemus of Greek mythology. Pandora's atmosphere is a mix of nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, so that's like ours, xenon, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen sulfide, the latter 3 which are unbreathable for humans, who wear exopacks when outside the buildings or vehicles. The atmosphere of Pandora does have enough oxygen for humans, but too much carbon dioxide. The Na'vi have special organs similar to kidneys that take advantage of this atmosphere to extract greater amounts of oxygen for their bloodstream. So there's a bunch of shit, I guess, that comes from the books or whatever. And,
yes, that's another aspect that we didn't talk about. Just borrowing, or of course, heavily leaning on the books.
And 80% of Earth's mass, so 0.8 Earth gravity, which isn't reflected in anyone's movements. So that's kind of lost on me. That seems to be a weird thing. But like you said, it allows everything to grow larger.
You know what's weird too, Kyle? Something that they do, I don't know if it bothered you, but it sort of bugged me just from an unappealing angle. And again, playing up that sort of oceanic, underwater, above water thing. A lot of the creatures had like these gill-like slits in them, like they had like holes in them, which I just think is gross.
Yeah, it's a lot of it. It is a little gross, but
I don't need to see, like, it's like that. I understand what you're doing there, and maybe it's not supposed to be necessarily appealing, but probably be less appealing if I could not see inside the creature with all these various gills and holes. It works under the ocean because we don't have to look at that
Gills
shit.
and holes. Ugh.
When it's crawling around with us, it's just like, I wouldn't have made that design choice. So some of the creatures are super cool. I like, again, what they did where they took sort of an Earth-like approximation and just made it a little more alien. You had like the armored panther type creature. I had the names written down somewhere. You had that giant sort of hammerhead.
Yeah, that I liked
thing.
that a lot. Like you can imagine.
That was super cool.
Yeah, it was cool. It was very dinosaur-like.
Yeah, very dinosaur-like, very triceratops, stegosaurus, whatever you think about with that, type of thing. So the creatures and the banshees, again, calling up Bahamut and these exotic-looking wyverns or dragons or whatever, making it kaiju, like, kind of like a cinematic Pokemon. It's kind of cute, kind of fearsome. I definitely dug that. So there's a lot. There's really a lot to like here. I do wonder, in seeing certain actors and stuff signed on for the coming movies, where they're going to go with things. It is interesting. And also, I think over a timeline of close to another 10 years for all 5, right?
Yeah, I think
5
it's
is slated for 31 or something.
Yeah, it's like so crazy. It'll come before we know it, though. I guess the next 8 years, if they go quickly, who knows? But I hope that the Na'vi invade the Earth. I hope that they discover technology, and the 5th movie is about them invading and destroying what's left of the Earth. And that's how it all wraps up.
You know what's interesting too? Like, we're mining for this unobtainium, this rock, right? This element, this substance, where it's not like this interstellar type thing where it's like, we can't grow food on the Earth anymore. There's no more corn, but we found this thing that's edible on this planet. So let's get that so people can still eat. It's like they're mining this thing for money. Like, what are they doing for food on Earth? That's another thing that begs a question of, how are they eating?
Well,
They're not eating rocks.
This goes back to the Wikipedia article, and again, all this stuff is so cool. They could explore all this stuff. In the Avatar universe, humans have achieved a very technologically advanced post-industrial society ruled and dominated by powerful corporations and industry. One of Earth's most powerful corporations is the Globally Integrated Resources Development Administration, a public company which evolved from a Silicon Valley startup that owns all resources off Earth. The Interplanetary Commerce Administration granted these sole rights to the RDA under the stipulation that the use of weapons of mass destruction is prohibited. So, like, there's all this cool shit. Like
that is cool.
You spend 3 hours in this goddamn movie. Maybe tell us some of this.
Yeah, give us some of that Bible
instead
of
having tentacle sex with animals connecting to each other telepathically.
And it doesn't even feel good. I don't think. Maybe it does. That would be even weirder. Maybe it's better that they. Never mind.
It says, technologically, humans have achieved monumental advancements by 2154. Interplanetary and interstellar space travel and colonization, virtual 3D printing and holography mapping, and advanced methods of cryonics and psionics are employed. Using their capability of advanced genetic engineering, humans develop avatar hybrid bodies that genetically distinct modified human DNA, blah, blah, blah. Through psionics, genetically matched humans are then mind-linked to these avatars. So, like, they could get more into the science of it. And all of this, and there's like all this writing about all the human machines and shit. Like,
I like that they have all that background and texture and this, all that world building. But give us some of that, man. That's fun stuff.
Yeah, me too. That's the good stuff, in my opinion. But anyway, that's all I have to say about this movie. I have nothing else to say about it. Do you have anything else you'd like to end on?
Well, I understand why you wanted to do it. I really ultimately thought of this as like part Lord of the Rings, part sci-fi anime. And in that anime thing, I would say like part Ghibli and part Shiro. Ghibli for the organic Earth stuff, Shiro for the tech, and again, shout out to Masamune Shiro. And part French comic book, like something Mobius would do. Like, that's what it felt like, a live action version of something like Jean Girard would give us. But I don't know, like, I think for me, a lot of it could have been better. I know you're taking a little out of column B at column A with the story and a little bit of column B with the technology. But again, like, you have this badass Wikipedia page with that Bible and all that info in there. I think that's the kind of stuff that's cool. Give us a little more bedrock underneath all these crazy Weta effects, visual effects. And it's weird too. Like the evergreen nature, again, half evergreen and half indifferent nature of Avatar is interesting. Like, why so long between? Here's the weird thing. It's weird that you wait so long between the first movie and the second movie. But what's even stranger is that there's going to be 3 more after that. What? I really am genuinely curious of what the second one looks like, because was that sort of a holding period while they felt the technology was catching up to now what they wanted to do with the sequel film. And I'm uninformed when it comes to that, but I'm genuinely curious, because waiting for such a lucrative franchise, especially for such a long period of time, is very rare. And then to follow up in relatively quick succession with the next 3 after that is a very peculiar rhythm for a franchise. And I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. So, and we talk about a lot of franchises on this show.
Yeah, it's all been filmed, right? Now they're just working on the...
Yeah.
All the time they're going to take to do all the special effects. I think, as far as I know, the kind of military officer character in the second one is Carmela Soprano.
Interesting.
Yeah. I saw images and video of that for sure. So she's in there somewhere.
She's great.
In like some sort of military getup, which is cool. Yeah, she's awesome. So yeah, that's Avatar, 2009's Avatar. I rented it on Amazon Prime. I thought I had Apple TV or whatever, or Apple, whatever it's called. And it said it was on there, but then you still had to rent it. So I didn't really understand that. So maybe something's...
No Disney Plus for you?
I don't have Disney Plus, no. I don't have any of that.
Okay.
Although I have to get ESPN Plus for hockey this year. And I was thinking about doing maybe the Hulu, ESPN, Disney thing if it was cheaper. But there's nothing on Disney I want to watch. So I don't really care about that.
You're not going to start in on Star Wars?
No. Oh my God. No. I'm more done with Star Wars than I've ever been with Star Wars. Every day that passes is a day I'm more done with it than the previous day. But I appreciate it.
I think we need the time. We need the time to elapse now. We need the refresh.
Right.
We talk about resetting. This is a good time to reset.
Indeed.
I feel like. I don't know if they will. I don't think they are going to do that.
I don't think they can afford it, to be honest. Dave, let's end with a dad joke.
Okay. I got my cards out here. I got my dad joke cards you want to see. That reminds of my 3 sons. Remember the intro of My 3 Sons? All right, my friend. All right. Did I ever read this one? Kyle, why did the man name his dogs Rolex and Timex?
I don't know.
Because they were watchdogs.
Oh, that's a good one. No, you never read that one, I don't think.
All right, no, I don't recognize that one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
My senile old ass.
All right, my friend. Well, have a good rest of your day. Thanks for your time.
Super fun. Thank you.
Yeah, it was good to watch this and check this off the list of things that I probably should know. So culturally relevant, but surprisingly not culturally relevant, but still culturally relevant. Avatar.
I wonder what the percentage of people that are going to listen to this watched it. I'm imagining like a 90%.
Yeah, I would imagine most people. It seems like everyone's just the numbers suggest that it's a movie that's been widely digested by people, right? So
exactly.
So we'll see. We're late to the party, but that we always are on Knockback. That's the idea.
That's how we do it.
Yeah. So Dave, thank you for your time. Appreciate you. And thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of all things Last Stand Media. We couldn't do without you over on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia, laststandmedia.store for merch. You know the drill. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye. Knockback, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. Knockback's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including Knockback, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.